Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's XPM webinar series, which is going to be on Atlassian governance. My name is Steve Terrelmas. I'm the practicing lead for XPM. And we do this webinar series every week on Thursday morning, Central Time, 11 a.m. for about an hour. And what we do is we cover some of the top issues that are happening in the Atlassian ecosystem. So if you are interested in more of these webinars, please go to our website, xpm.com, and there you will see all of the upcoming events, as well as several other activities that we have going on that you are welcome to register for. Today, we're going to talk about Atlassian Enterprise Governance. When we talk about the word governance, that can be a fairly big topic to discuss. And so we're actually going to start kind of at the 10,000 foot level today and drill our way down into the details of what governance is, how that applies to the Atlassian ecosystem, and some of the things that you can practically do to help manage governance well, and not just well, but also a grassroots governance effort from the bottom up, not just a heavy-handed top-down governance. So why do we need to talk about governance when we talk about Atlassian? Well, as a software and enterprise software product and ecosystem, obviously governance is an important thing to discuss. But it's even more so, I think, important with Atlassian for a couple of reasons. The biggest one being the dynamic growth that Atlassian has seen in the marketplace and how that's affecting you as a user or a manager of Atlassian products within your enterprise. Let me just show you something real quick here before we get into the presentation. This is a little bit of a fun thing that I like to do, and that is periodically take a look at the stock price of Atlassian. So if you've been tracking this at all lately, you've noticed that there's some craziness going on here. I've got this tracked out to 5 years. But we have really seen Atlassian stock price increase significantly over the last 5 years. And even over the last year, it's really escalated quite a bit. Atlassian now has a market cap over $100 billion. And here's another diagram that does a graph comparison of Atlassian and two of its, what I'd loosely call competitors, Salesforce and ServiceNow. And you can see even in that environment, even in that business environment, Atlassian is outpacing its competitors significantly. So how does this affect governance? Well, it affects governance in a lot of ways, because every time Atlassian stock price goes up, you know that means that they're acquiring more users. And so if you are operating an Atlassian ecosystem in your company, you are also probably experiencing some sort of growth along this trajectory, either in users or in Atlassian products or in upgrade and functionality. So one of the things I like to talk a lot about with Atlassian is what is driving Atlassian. So our session today is going to be on governance. So let me start off by talking a little bit about what is driving some of this growth with Atlassian, because you'll see that that growth and those drivers are actually affecting what we're seeing around the needs of governance. So for instance, there are three major avenues in where we're seeing dramatic growth within the Atlassian ecosystem. And these tie directly to their fiscal budgeting, because this is their goal, this is their strategy. They want to develop their core competencies around these three areas, and all three of them are going to affect governance. The first one is the migration to cloud. So if you're interested or want to learn more about migrating the platform of Atlassian products onto cloud, we have got several webinars that we do around that. We have an upcoming workshop around that you can check out on our website. But moving people from a server-based platform onto a cloud-based platform does two things. One, it changes how you are managing your product. And two, it also changes the model to a subscription model. So a server-based platform is going to have periodic releases that can be managed and governed by the administrator. The cloud-based platform is going to be a perpetual release platform on a subscription model, which means that the updates that are happening to your system and to all the users on your system are happening on a periodic real-time basis. And so that can affect governance as well. The second big avenue of growth that Atlassian is seeing over the last several years is around the area of agile at scale. So if you know anything about Atlassian products, you know that Jira is one of their large benchmark products. And Jira is an issue tracking tool for teams. Teams can be a group of a few people, 4 or 5 people that are working on a project. Or you might have an ecosystem that's using Atlassian across multiple teams, and those teams are starting to bump into each other as you're continuing to grow as a company as well. Atlassian is recognizing that and pulling together the processes and the platforms and the tools to help your company grow. And the biggest thing that they've done in the last few years around this is acquiring AgileCraft, which is a scaled agile software solution. They've repurposed that now. It's called Jira Align, and it's designed to be a scaled agile tool for multiple teams. We are working with several customers implementing this tool. And if you have not looked at how you are going to manage governance as your company scales into the Atlassian ecosystem, that is definitely something you're going to want to get involved in and start thinking about in building it. Even the scaled agile methodology calls out the need for the LACE, which is the governing body of scaled agile methodology, right? But that LACE is going to be managing methodology, not necessarily platforms and products. So as your company grows and scales across the platform, you're going to definitely need to consider governance as well. The third major area that Atlassian is seeing growth in is in the area of service management. ITIL systems around ITSM, facility service management, HR service management, all of these things. The literal representation of that is an explosion of products and functionality around service management. So what used to be a simple service desk that was piggybacked on top of Jira as a project base now includes Insight, which is a CMD database and can even be a CRM database. It includes OpsGenie, which is a servicing tool for teams. It includes Status Page, which is an uptime tool for teams. And it includes a lot more functionality that's happening. If your company is looking at that, we have had a flood of requests from people. Many of them are actually migrating off of ServiceNow, which is another stock that's identified in this graph here. If you're thinking about that or moving toward that, that's definitely going to impact your governance as well. So my introduction here in this webinar is to really help you understand how the trajectory of Atlassian that we're seeing represented in their market cap growth is actually going to directly hit you on a governance basis and something that you need to prepare yourself for. So having said that, let me jump back over to my presentation and actually talk a little bit about what this governance is and how you can actually build a healthy governance structure within your organization. Okay. I'm going to present this from the perspective of the 10,000 foot level down to the ground level. Somewhere along there, I'm going to catch where you live. You may live at the 10,000 foot level. You may live on the ground level. Maybe you're just starting to get into the Atlassian ecosystem, and it has been your responsibility to live on all of those levels, which is probably a very chaotic place for you to be right now, especially if your user base is growing. And if you are starting to use this tool and your user base is growing, there's going to need to be some decisions and conversations that are going to happen around what are the roles and responsibilities of people in my organization around the Atlassian ecosystem, and how is that going to evolve and develop as we grow and use these tools more and more. But for this presentation, I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. So hopefully some of these concepts and ideas are going to be attractive to you, are going to be helpful for you. When I get to the ground level, I'm actually going to demonstrate to you how you can build out an entire governance framework within the Atlassian tools themselves, right? If we're going to use Atlassian tools for business, why not use those great tools to manage our governance processes as well? Okay, so let's jump right in. The first slide I have here is at the super top high level, and I call it my Atlassian rocket slide. It's really the idea of when you think about your company, you have certain core competencies. You have things that make your company valuable. These are your rocket ship. And presumably you're doing well with your rocket ship and you're growing as a company. However, as you know, a rocket ship left to its own devices can be a fairly risky thing. It can manage itself maybe for a while, but as things continue to grow, it can become more and more risky not to have the control station or the control tower. And so I like to kind of liken governance across an ecosystem or within an enterprise software structure as the control tower for your rocket. And the reason why I love this analogy is because the control tower is never designed to stop the rocket from what the rocket does best. It's never designed to hold the rocket back from accomplishing what it's intended to accomplish. It's designed to provide the necessary tools and framework around that rocket and support around that rocket so that it can maximize the benefit of its purpose. And that's why I love this analogy of governance with a rocket and a control tower. From the perspective of an Atlassian tool set and from the perspective of your business and how your business makes money, we're always looking at things like aligning strategies across multiple teams, improving processes to make sure that they're more structured and more efficient, and then providing general efficiencies across the organization that allow you to get through things faster that don't make you money so that you can focus on those things that do make you money and focus on doing that well for yourselves and your customers. So these are a couple of ideas that we want our rocket ship to be fantastic at. How can the control tower support that? So I couldn't help myself but come up with an acronym for this. Maybe that'll help you remember it. But the control tower is a framework that is designed to promote representation, openness, coordination, knowledge, expertise, and teamwork, spelling the word rocket, of course. So let me talk a little bit about each of these. Representation. We want our governance framework not to be heavy-handed, not to be top-down, but to be representative of the people that are operating within the rocket itself. Openness. Openness is a crucial element to any strategy of a company's success. The more your employees and workers can share their ideas, the more your company will grow and succeed. That rising tide truly does lift all ships when we're working with the openness of ideas. And so from a governance standpoint, we want not only our governance process to be open, but we also want our governance to promote and build tools and frameworks that allow openness across the entire organization. Coordination, the ability to quickly meet and quickly organize and quickly share information and communicate around things. We're going to want a governance framework that can definitely do that. Knowledge, if you're going to have a governance framework around an enterprise software tool like Atlassian, you're going to want some people inside that framework that actually understand the Atlassian products. These are going to be some of the leaders in our Atlassian governance. This is a fantastic way to build a grassroots governance organization, is by bringing the actual users and admins that understand the tool into the governing process as well. Expertise. So I always like to say the difference between knowledge and wisdom is knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And so we can apply that to our idea of knowledge and expertise, right? We may have some people that know a lot about the tools or know a lot about software, but expertise provides us the opportunity to make sure that we are operating efficiently. A great example of this is if we bring in an additional product or an add-on into our Atlassian ecosystem, those with expertise in our governance framework are going to be able to give us the wisdom that we need to know how that's going to impact the rest of the ecosystem that we're using this tool for, whether or not we've actually considered this product in the past, and why or why not it was a successful solution for us in the past. That's some of the expertise we're looking for. And then finally, teamwork. I love the fact that Atlassian stock ticker is TEAM, T-E-A-M. And the reason why is because their entire paradigm is based around building products to allow teams to succeed. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with the governance framework. We're trying to build a framework that allows our teams in our rocket to succeed. So that's kind of the touchy-feely part about governance. That's the 10,000-foot level. Let's drill down a little bit further and get ourselves to where this is a little bit less theoretical and maybe a little bit more practical. The next thing I want to talk about is setting a vision for your governance. This is important to do. When we work with companies and help them build out a governance framework, we give them a vision that they could use. This may be a good vision for you, or you may want to come up with your own, but you're definitely going to want to come up with a vision. Our vision is ensuring an ongoing balance between enterprise goals and enterprise growth via the flexible controls managed directly by the employees who best understand the purposes and value of Atlassian products across the organization. Notice my rocket model fits right into this. Enterprise goals and enterprise growth is your rocket. Flexible controls managed directly by the employees is your control tower. not just employees, but employees, of course, that understand the purpose and value of the Atlassian tools. And then the concept of the control tower and the rocket is that balance that we're trying to build so that the rocket can be most efficient and avoid any unnecessary risks. So that's going to be our governance vision. The purpose of our governance is going to be defined in this sentence. And again, you can take this if you want to, you can use it or you can change it. The governance body will support the creation, discussion, decision, and implementation of Atlassian products, apps, components, and configuration. There's a lot in that sentence. I want you to focus on the red word I have there, which is support. I mentioned this earlier in my previous slide with the rocket ship. We are really trying to support the growth trajectory and the success of our company. But how are we going to support it? We're going to support it with the discussions, the decisions, the implementation around the entire Atlassian ecosystem, which is not only going to include the products, but also how those products are implemented. Maybe even conversations around how teams are using the tool, what portion of that use is standardized across teams versus what is customized for specific team needs. This is the purpose of governance. So now we're kind of taking it down to, let's say, the 8,000-foot level, right? Let's bring it down even further to maybe the 5,000-foot level, where we really start to see and focus in on the actual pieces of this governance structure and the things that are being affected by it. This diagram here represents two things. One is going to be the products and the teams that are going to be impacted by governance. The other is going to be what I like to call the 4 governance goals. Let's focus on those goals first of all. Scalable growth, visible control, user ownership, and knowledge sharing. These kind of speak to those components of the rocket that I mentioned earlier. Excuse me. Of course, scalable growth is something that we always want to prepare for. Even if we are operating in a stable ecosystem within our industry, there is going to be the need for scalable growth at some point in time. Technology changes. Even if our core competencies don't change, technology often does. A great example of this is a utility company whose responsibility is to meter the load for its customers. The core competency for the utility company is metering the load. It's something they've been doing for the last 75 to 100 years and something they will always do in the future. However, the processes and tools that they use to meter that customer load has changed dramatically over the last 75 to 100 years. So something in your organization is going to scale. And we want to make sure that we are utilizing our governance framework to make sure that the scale for the rocket is being successful. Visible control. This is the ability to actually see what's going on. You'll see later on in this presentation when I get down to the ground level and actually show you how to use the Atlassian framework for managing governance, how that framework is so brilliant at actually visualizing the control for our entire ecosystem. User ownership. Those two kind of go hand in hand, visible control and user ownership, right? You really can't promote user ownership if things are not visible. But once you get things out there and visible to your ecosystem, then you can kind of draw and harvest on the best of the best within your user groups in order to bring that ecosystem up to where it needs to be and to have the ownership of that user base as well into your Atlassian governance framework. And then finally, knowledge sharing. We always want to be promoting knowledge sharing across our organization. Knowledge sharing is going to be the idea where that's going to support the scalable growth, right? It's going to be the thing that's going to allow us to scale in the maximum way. It's been demonstrated over and over again in the sociology of companies that those companies that hoard knowledge, or those individuals in companies that hoard knowledge, get left behind in the industry. And those that are open and are sharing knowledge tend to get ahead and grow faster than their peers. So those are our goals for governance. As we build out our framework later on, that I'm going to show you here in a few minutes, you're going to see how that framework is intentionally built to support these 4 goals. If you are looking at the need for governance in your organization and you would like some help with that, let us know, because we can come and work alongside of you and help you build that framework that is going to support these 4 governance goals. Let's talk about the bubbles on the outside of this diagram. The top set of bubbles are basic products that exist in the Atlassian ecosystem. That's products like Jira, Confluence. You have a number of source control products. You have portfolio governance. By portfolio, I mean advanced roadmaps or Jira Align tools. These are the tools of the ecosystem that Atlassian puts out there for their users, and they are powerful tools. Some of them are not very standardized tools. If you are in the Jira ecosystem, especially if you are part of your responsibility is to administer Jira, you know that when you got that responsibility, it was kind of like someone dumped a box of Legos on your desk without an instruction manual, right? There are a lot of different moving parts there that can create a lot of discussion, conversation, unfortunately, confusion, distraction around how that tool is built. Confluence is the same thing. Confluence is just an open content portal. Depending on how we bring people into Confluence, we can have redundant data in different spaces. We can have lost information that's not being referenced and connected where it needs to be. So lots of traps and pitfalls around the efficiency and utilization of these tools without some sort of governance framework that helps people out with that. Specifically, this is important, of course, with portfolio governance as well. As you scale as an organization, how are you going to manage that? And of course, source control. Bitbucket is the main source control tool for Atlassian, and that tool is changing dramatically, especially as people are considering moving their source control off of server systems and onto the cloud. Bitbucket is updating itself significantly and frequently in order to accommodate that. So understanding that growth within the tools, understanding that growth within our company, and how those two are going to work together is an important element around the components of governance. Along the bottom, you see some of the governing people and tool and processes and also structures that are going to support this entire governance process that we want to set up. So things like governing policies. What are some of the Atlassian policies that we want to implement? For example, what workflows are standardized versus what workflows can be customized? Atlassian best practices. What's the best way to set up permissions in a Jira project? Is it better to use groups or roles? Things like that. Governing bodies. Who are the people that are involved in the health and implementation of the governance framework? Atlassian governance framework tools. This goes back to visual control, user ownership, and knowledge sharing. What is the tool set that we're going to use to build our governance on? I'm going to show you an example of this later on. And then Atlassian how-to articles. What have we learned? And how are we capturing that? This goes again to scalable growth and visual and visible control, right? The more people are actually capturing the information they've learned and getting it out there for everybody to see it, the more we're going to be able to scale quickly. Okay, so there's a lot in here, but we are getting down to the ground level. And so we need to start talking about some of the practical things that governance is going to do. And there's a lot of practical ideas around the Atlassian products and the governance structures and bodies that are going to support these 4 governance goals. Okay, I have a thing, now that we get a little bit further, I have a thing that I like to call governance pillars. These are kind of the 3 major avenues that you will implement governance in your organization. The first one is in the governance structure. And what I mean by the governance structure is, what are the people, what is the framework, what is the group that is going to be implementing, supporting, promoting this governance element, right? Who are the teams that are going to be doing it? I'm going to show you some examples of that when we get down to the ground level around how you can build teams around a governance structure. Second thing is the governance framework. What is the product or what is the process that you're going to use to support governance? Again, I'm going to show you a framework here in a little bit. And then finally, the governance policies. What are those policies? How are those policies decided? How are those policies changed? The last thing we want to do is have a policy that is stale, especially when you have dynamic product changes within the Atlassian ecosystem. We may need our policies to be dynamic as well. If you're operating on a cloud-based environment, I can promise you that user management, user provisioning, administration of users is very dynamic in the cloud environment right now. If you live in that world right now, I can tell you things like the site admin role or the site admin group in cloud is changing. It's shifting away from just product-based into entire cloud-based structure. And so things like that happen all the time as the product evolves. And so our policies need to have a process that allows us to update them be aware of when they need to be changed as well. So governance pillars, if you're thinking about the idea of where do I start, think about it from the perspective of these three things. We need policies, we need a structure, and we need a framework. And those three areas are a good starting point when you're thinking about how to implement a governance process. Okay, now we have kind of made our way down, all the way from the theoretical rocket ship, all the way down to where we're going to start building out our governance process that's going to actually practically allow us to implement those governance goals that we talked about. And so I'm going to show you next some specific examples of how you can build out these policies, framework, and structure that you are welcome to utilize. And again, of course, if I'm talking really fast right now, but if there's any further help you guys need, or you want me to want us to come and help you with this, let us know. This is one of the things we do as part of our core competencies. Okay, before I jump into that, let me transition into who we are. So you may be wondering, who is this Expium and what is the difference between Expium and Atlassian and why are they talking to us about Atlassian? So Atlassian is a very, very successful company around the world. We're looking at about 230,000 companies around the world that are currently using Atlassian products, and of course, millions and millions of users. So one thing that Atlassian did early on in their company was they created a strong relationship with partners. A lot of major software companies like Microsoft and Google and others have a partner platform, but I think Atlassian does the best job of actually empowering their partners. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you were to reach out to Atlassian and say, hey, I need some help implementing a scaled solution for our Agile teams, one of the first things they would do is actually connect you directly to a partner. Another thing that they do is they allow partners to actually license to customers at the best rates. And that's an unusual thing. So if you license off the shelf with Atlassian, you can actually often get a better rate by licensing directly with a partner. And so let me talk to you a little bit about this partnership and why it's important to know a partner in your Atlassian journey. This is very critical. Expium is an Atlassian partner. There's about 500 partners around the world. Those partners do different things and have varying levels of expertise. The highest level of expertise is a Platinum Solutions partner. That is what Expium is. There's about 20 Platinum Solution partners in the United States. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of where we are in the relationship that we have with Atlassian. What can we do as a Platinum Solutions partner? Well, we're a full service partner, so anything you need with Atlassian, we can do. But more specifically, one of our core competencies is training. We'll come alongside you and your team, train them on products or new features, and we can help you at an admin level or a user level. If you're migrating to cloud, one of the things you definitely want to do is engage some training with that migration so your users don't come in Monday morning on a brand new platform and are completely lost. So training is one thing that we can do. Consulting. This is just strategic consulting, like some of the governance stuff that we're talking about now, or practical tactical consulting, like how do I build out a Jira project? How do I implement a program within Jira Line, right? We can do all of that for you. Custom development. We actually, Expium as a Platinum partner, grew out of another company that's a full stack software development company called Oasis Digital that still exists, and we still work hand in hand with them. Our offices are right next to them, and they are a full stack development company, so we are able to utilize that relationship to build customized solutions. If you go to our website or if you go to our YouTube channel, you will see some of the case studies that we have done where we've actually built custom portals sitting on top of a Jira or sitting on top of an Atlassian structure for customers. And we also can utilize custom development for advanced automations and other features as well. And then finally, licensing. Like I mentioned a while ago, Expium can support your licensing needs. One of the biggest benefits of licensing through a partner is not only do you get better pricing, you also get direct hands-on support with your licensing. For example, if you're licensing with Atlassian, you're going to be working through an email or through a portal system and talking to somebody different every time. If you're licensing through Expium, you're going to be talking to me. It's that simple. And when you have a question about whether or not you should bring in an add-on into your ecosystem, I'll help you. When you want to have a budgetary quote for your 2022 budget, I'll send you one. And so that's the difference. That's the hands-on approach that you get with licensing with a partner. And so there's no difference in the licenses themselves. You're not actually entering a license agreement with Expium. Your license agreement is still with Atlassian. We are just providing all the services you need around those licenses. So that's who we are. That's what we can provide for you. If you are interested in any of those things, feel free to reach out to us at expium.com and we will connect directly with you. You'll probably be talking to me within a week. Okay, let me keep going into our actual ground level Atlassian governance structure. So I talked a lot about governance. You're like, right, that's really good stuff. How do I build something like that? What do I do to actually get this thing implemented within my company? So you're going to want to think about those three pillars: process, structure, and framework, right? So I'm going to start by talking about the framework, and I'm going to introduce the structure and the policies around that conversation. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is look at the Atlassian tools that exist in the ecosystem that are fantastic for building out a governance framework. And of course, the two tools I'm referring to are Confluence and Jira. If you know anything about these two tools, you know that Jira is about action and Confluence is about information. Right? So if I could boil those two powerhouse of the tools down to two words, I'd say action and information. So when we're thinking about building out a framework for governance, we want to build it out within those two tools around those paradigms, right? So Confluence, let's start with that first. You should have a Confluence space dedicated to governance. If you are working in Confluence, you know that Confluence is a tool for content management. That content management is organized in groups called spaces. So spaces can be a private space for an individual user. It could be a team space. It could be a project space. It could be a division-wide space. Spaces can be anything you want them to be. And this is actually part of the governance concern that people get into with Confluence. If you're interested in that, we have a Confluence webinar that we actually talk a little bit about that. But when you look at spaces in Confluence, you want macro spaces and micro spaces. One of your macro spaces has to be governance. Why? Because you want open visibility. You don't want anybody in your company wondering where to go to learn about governance and where to go to see what you are doing in governance or how to get involved in governance. So we're going to have one governance space that's going to include everything for our company. Doesn't matter how small or big your company is. You might just have one little tiny governance group. You may have a huge enterprise-wide organization that is encompassing a hub and spoke type governance structural body that's very complex. Nonetheless, we want to bring the majority of our governance content into one place where people can easily find what can be in this space. Well, first of all, we want to tell people what governance is all about. We might want to tell them what our purpose is. We might want to actually have some information around governance. And these links actually go directly to our articles on our blog site, which you can get to off of our website, expium.com, and also our YouTube videos. If you just type Expium into YouTube, you will see our YouTube channels. And one of our YouTube video series that we did, and I'm going to highlight this because it's directly read. Hey, stop it, stop. Thank you for the advertisement. I love it. What I love about YouTube is they want to advertise to me Atlassian competitive products when I go to watch my videos, which is kind of funny. Like all other YouTube channels, we have playlists. One of the playlists we have is our governance series. So let me talk real quick about this as a tangential. Expium actually for about 2 years went around the country and did a number of governance series forums. We did this in conjunction with Atlassian senior management and also with Google, okay? We captured some of the best of the presentations of this governance forum and we put it out here on our YouTube site under this governance series. So there's a number of videos. I think we've got about 12 videos out there around governance. If you want to explore this topic more on enterprise governance, this is a great place to start. So I always like to point that out to people. But back to the point at hand, if you're actually going to build a content tool around governance, a great thing to include in that is direct links to those things that are going to help people with understanding governance, especially if it's new, like you're new to our company or you're new to this idea of governance. Click here and we'll give you a series of a series of videos or documents that you can read through that give you a high level understanding about what our governance structure is and our governance policies and things like that. Okay, here are some icons or some pictures that we use to capture some of these you saw in my presentation. Some of these I'll get into a little bit later on, but it's just a quick visual is worth, 1,000 words. And then also we might have a space directory over here where people can drill down into some of the more important structure ideas or policies or how-to articles or whatever, which is exactly where I'm going next. So the next concept around our Confluence space and our information is going to be around the governance structure. What is a governance structure? Loosely defined, this is the governing bodies that are supporting the governance process and promoting the governance process. That governing body can be complex or simple depending on how many people you have, how big your Atlassian ecosystem is, etc. Here's an example of one that we use and often recommend to people. We have an Atlassian steering committee. These are going to be the top group of people that are going to be managing governance, not necessarily executive people in here, although you'll probably need at least 1 or 2 executive people because purchasing is going to be done here. So you're going to need somebody that can write those checks for buying Atlassian products or doing things. But you might also have somebody like your Jira administrator in here, right? So this is going to be a small group of people. Even in a company that's got several thousand users, you may only have 4 or 5 people in this group. It's going to be a final decision-making group that is only needed for certain decisions, not all decisions. We want to, again, push this down to the grassroots as much as possible. We want to utilize the tools as much as possible to avoid things like timely decision processes and meetings and things like that. We all have enough on our calendars. We don't want more meetings on our calendars around governance. So we're actually going to push authority down into the process as much as we can. Some things will have to be decided at this high level, but not everything. Underneath that is going to be 2 distinct groups. We call them Atlassian system administrative groups and Atlassian product administrative groups. The main difference between these 2 is the product admin group is going to be around governance for how we use the tools, right? The system admin group is going to be for governance around how the Atlassian tools interact with other tools in your company and with people, like user provisioning and things like security and things like that. Okay, so the system admin group is going to be a much broader group. The number of people in this group are going to be much bigger, right? Because your security compliance person or your InfoSec person is not going to need to be involved in every discussion in governance in Atlassian, but there are some that are going to be very important for him to be involved in, right? Your Active Directory admin or your email admin, they may need to be involved in some conversations, but not all. So you may have a wide variety of people that are in this group, but they're you pick and choose the people that are necessary for whatever governance topic it needs to be dealt with at that particular time. On the other side, your product admin group are going to be your experts in the products. These, again, may not necessarily be your functional managers in your organization. This may be Bob, who's, in one of your Agile teams, but he happens to be a super whiz on the Atlassian products, right? So it could be any handful of people. These are going to be the people that are going to help you with tool configuration, help you with understanding why is it important to standardize some things in the tool versus make some things customized. And these people, though they're a smaller group than the system admin group, will likely be more of a tight-knit group where they're all talking on a fairly regular basis. Okay, and then underneath this governing structure is going to be the project managers, the product managers, the development managers, even the users that are going to be pushing the governance things up from the grassroots that we need to deal with and going to basically be filling our governance backlog so that we are actually discussing and talking about those governance things that are impacting the majority of people. They're also going to be sponsoring governance events. We're going to talk a little bit later on when I show you a workflow for, say, how to buy a new add-on, how a particular user can be involved in that governance decision as a sponsor, right? Maybe a user wants an add-on, so he becomes a sponsor, right? Okay, so that's an example of governing bodies. Again, you don't have to do this. This is kind of a middle governing body. If you're more complex, you may have a series of governing bodies like this with a hub and spoke system with different divisions having their own governing bodies that all report up to a single governing body in the hub. If you're much smaller, you may only have one group here, just a basic steering committee, and that's it. So there's some ideas around that. Also some ideas around activity and how the governing bodies can manage activities, different things that you can do in the Jira framework or in the Confluence framework. I won't get into a whole lot of this, but things like purchasing and events and requests, nomination of governing bodies, actions. This is all in Jira. So when I show you the Jira framework, I'm actually going to show you how that can work within Jira. And then over here in Confluence, this is the Confluence framework that I'm showing you right now. Having this as a nice, simple diagram for people to be able to see will help them really understand what's going on within your governance framework and how to go to the places they need to in order to affect different things. Okay, in your different groups, you're going to want to also identify what these groups do. So any user should be able to click on the Atlassian Steering Committee, see the purpose and the structure of the Atlassian Steering Committee, see who the members are in the Atlassian Steering Committee, what roles they play, what pillar they come from in your organization, or maybe even if there's an open position, what open position is out there. Maybe there's even a link back to Jira in an action item, which I'll show you in a second, where you might want to have a voting item in Jira around an open position. Down here, you might have meeting notes, and things like that. Also, you're going to want to include your other governing bodies in there as well. Here's one for the products admin group. Here's one for the system admin group. There actually might be a specific decision log that you bring out because as these governing bodies are making decisions, you might want to call out specific decisions that are made. Remember, Confluence is a content portal. It's not a documentation tool, which gives us the power to replicate information in places where people need it, right? This decision tree could easily be coming from meeting notes or from other policies and things that are in other parts of Confluence. They're only being visually called to on this page. They don't live on this page. So the user can see what they need to see all in one snapshot, and then they can actually drill down into that particular thing to go to the document and find out the information they need to know about that particular decision. If that idea is foreign to you in the world of Confluence, feel free to check out our Confluence webinar and our Confluence bootcamp, where we talk about utilizing Confluence as a content portal, not just a documentation tool. Okay, governance structure, of course, policies and standards. You can organize this however you want to. We have some key documents that we put out there as pictorials in a lot of our training classes around how to structure Jira projects, how to structure Confluence spaces, and some tactical and strategic ideas around that. If you ever come to one of our bootcamp classes, you'll see these diagrams used a lot. But you might have policies and standards, and you might want to break those out for administrators versus users, right? You may even want to have another thing that talks about policies in progress. And again, all of these are going to take you to a log where you're going to be able to see the information on them, maybe a brief summary of them and things like that. Again, drawing that visibility of information up and out so that people can see it readily. There may be some other things here like how-to articles. You might have an open opportunity for people to create how-to articles, putting them all on one page so that if Bob in one division starts using Tempo timesheets, he can immediately come out here and see if there's a how-to article on Tempo timesheets. And if not, maybe he can write one, right? So those are how-to articles. And then finally, I don't have it on here, but you might want to have like a timeline. If this is a new concept to you and you're implementing governance across your organization, you may want to put a roadmap out here for people to see how that's going and what things are coming out next. And when is it, when is there going to be an implementation of a product admin group or something to that extent? Okay, so you can take this wherever you want to go with it, but this governance process is going to be in Confluence for open visibility, knowledge sharing, involvement, and education of people. And it's going to be an opportunity for you to consolidate all that in one place, and also a place where people can find things where sometimes they may not even know they exist, right? I want an add-on for this particular thing. I research add-on 1. I come to my governance space to see knowledge information around it, and I realize we've actually researched 2 or 3 admins in add-ons in this area already. So now I actually learned something about information that I did not even know existed, but because of the structure and the visualization of this information, I've implemented that. Okay, that is my content portal. That is the information in my framework for helping people know what they need to know around governance and that sort of thing. Let me flip gears and go to my action. So I talked about Jira as a place of action, Confluence as a place of information. All of these governing things that we've just been talking about oftentimes have action behind them. And we want to use the fantastic tools in Jira to manage those actions. So let me jump over there real quick. First of all, I'm going to show you a dashboard. If you're going to have a governance activity happening in your Jira instance, you're probably going to have a governance project and you're going to have governance issue types. If so, why not build a governance dashboard where people can easily see what's happening in the world of governance at any time they want to? For example, this might be a filter results gadget around the different activities that are happening or open issues in the governance project. This could be a pie chart, and it could be managed by issue type, or it could be managed by a component, or it could be managed by a division, or it could be managed by an Atlassian product. You can, as you know about dashboards in Jira, is you can build a pie chart around almost any field that's out there. So that's another example. Here's a two-dimensional filter statistic around the different issue types in our governance project, along with the different people that maybe are assigned to those issue types or are motivating those issue types. And there's several other things that you can do, like an activity stream, what's happened recently in governance and things like that. Don't forget, one of the brilliant things about Jira dashboards is that everything on Jira dashboard is a link, which means that if you want to drill down into something, for example, what are these user product requests that I'm seeing right here? All you need to do is click on that and Jira will bring a filter for you on all three of those issues right there. So that's your dashboard. Let's talk a little bit about the project itself. So you're going to want to have a project for governance for a couple of reasons. One, you want to organize the actions, right? But two, you want the ability for people to actually create a governance ticket if they want to. What if somebody wants to nominate someone for a governing body or wants to put in a system request or a user product request or something to that effect? What if you have a variance in policy or you need to change your policy? You want people to be able to create these tickets so we can utilize the framework of Jira for people to create tickets. You want to have a user-based and user-motivated governance process. The best way to do it is actually allow your users to create governance tickets. Okay, so what can you do with some of these governance requests? Let's take a look at this project and some of the project settings behind it to see how some of these governance requests actually function. I like to look at the workflows. We often say that Jira answers three questions. What am I trying to do? How am I trying to do it? And what data do I need to complete that or report on it? The workflow is the big question of how do things get done, right? So let's take a look at, say, a user product request workflow. Bob works in a company that has 5,000 Atlassian users. Bob's been doing some research on his own, and he's come up with a brilliant idea that he's really excited about that utilizes an add-on in the marketplace to save multiple teams tons of time. How in the world does Bob motivate this idea into the governance body and get it implemented as quickly and efficiently as possible? So he's going to, first of all, because he knows that we have a governance process in place, he's going to come out to Jira. He's going to create a user product request. That user product request is going to go through a life cycle. It's going to start off with research. Bob's probably already done the research on this, but if he hasn't, he can do it. Part of that research might be capturing information in a document that then goes on the Confluence space, right? Why? Because Bob is going to want to promote this. The easiest way to promote it is to already have the information out there for people to review. The next thing that might happen is Bob might need to be responsible for gathering interest. Bob is one user in one team, in one division, in an instance that has 6,000 users. Are we going to go and buy an add-on and pay for it with 6,000 users because Bob wants it? Of course not. So let's get Bob some tools so that he can motivate this. So Bob can utilize the ticket itself to motivate interest. There's a vote option on every Jira ticket. He can go and talk to the members on his team and say, hey, vote this ticket up. He can then have his members of his team go out and talk to other teams, vote this ticket up. He can do presentations internally around this to groups of people. He can do a recording and send that recording out to the company and say, hey, I think this would be a fantastic idea that would really improve the life of 2,000 Atlassian users out there. I built a 5-minute video on this. Take a look at this. If you like this, go to this ticket and vote it up. All of a sudden, what's going to happen is the governing bodies are going to notice that one of the tickets has got more and more significant interest. You can actually use that interest as a litmus as to what tickets the governing bodies talk about. We'll only talk about tickets in this scenario that have 200 votes or something like that, right? So at some point, that's going to get enough interest where it's going to be ready to present to the governing bodies. Now, think about this for a second. When we think about corporate environments, we think about things like meetings, presentations, emails, right? One of the purposes of Atlassian tools is to cut through that if possible, right? Like I said about the video, Bob can put the video link right on the Jira ticket and send the Jira ticket out as a link to people. And then people can watch the video on their own time, even the people in the governing bodies. Then the people in the governing bodies can comment on the ticket themselves back to Bob, or they can have internal conversation on a private Confluence space or a private Confluence page around whether or not they should do this. They can do all of this without having a meeting, right? So people can do it when they have time to do it and you're not adding more meetings onto schedules. Or if it's a big enough deal, maybe they do want to have a meeting. Okay, as a result of the meeting, this might go on hold. We decide yes, but not now, right? The value of on hold is super powerful because that means that we have research for the future if somebody else decides that they're interested in this add-on as well. But likely it'll get purchased. And we have another workflow that I won't go through here in the governing body that is actually a purchase workflow, because purchasing an add-on is a completely different process than the need and the promotion and the implementation of the add-on. So this might sit here at rest and might be linked in Jira to the purchasing governance ticket that goes through the purchasing workflow. Finally, it's done. So now the product admin group is responsible for assigning somebody to configure this into the tool and build documentation. Of course, we don't want to get out of this workflow without having the proper documentation in our Confluence space to accommodate the people that are going to start using this tool. The best person to write this documentation is probably our friend Bob, and maybe he already has, right? So that's a station here on this workflow. And once that's done, finally, we can close this. Again, one of the biggest values about doing this is something that's not even on this workflow at all. Tickets that get created, even if they never get accepted and wind up getting closed, are out there now for research. At any point in time, we can call them to mind. If you have a Confluence document that talks about a particular add-on, through lessons learned, you can embed into that Confluence document the ticket of when that particular add-on was purchased or not purchased. So if anybody's interested in 3 years from now on this add-on, boom, without even having to ask anybody, call a meeting, email anyone, bother any Jira admin, boom, they know exactly where to go to find this information and to learn everything about this add-on that happened 3 years earlier. Okay, that's one example of the framework that you can use in Jira to seriously promote user management and excellent support of your control tower without pulling back any of the power of your rocket. You can do this without even adding meetings to your calendar. So I'm not going to go into any further of these ideas, but the idea around this is that take a few minutes and think about what are some of the actions that need to be done in a governing process. And then think about how those map out as far as their workflows. And you can very easily build a governance project for that. Okay, I'm going to start to wrap things up because we're almost out of time. I hope what I've given you today has been some really great ideas that you can take and use in your tool to implement things further. However, I do want to point out to you that the governance process that we have here is one that can be very complicated. And so don't take from my 1 hour drinking from the fire hose today that I expect you to go out and build this whole thing. Some people will be able to do that because their instances and their groups are small. Some people are going to need to really think about this, actually start to bring people together and have internal conversations around this. If you're looking at a complex solution and you need some help either with the strategic side, how can we in a strategic way build that rocket ship like Steve's talking about? Or if you need help from the perspective from a tactical side, how can we build that framework that he put out there, or the governing bodies and things like that? Do not hesitate to reach out to us at xpm.com or just email me directly, steve.terelmus@xpm.com. I will be happy to talk to you about this further. And with that, I'm going to wrap this up, but I will take a few minutes for questions if there's any open Q&A in the last few minutes of the webinar here. So we have one quick question out there around governance around licensing. I won't go into the details on that. If whoever asked that question, reach out to me separately and we can talk about that further. But I do just want to mention something really quickly. Licensing is changing dramatically in the Atlassian ecosystem. We have a cloud migration website, cloud migration webinar that we do that talks about migrating to cloud. And we talk a little bit about migrating from server to data center in that webinar as well. but just know that it's changing a lot. That can have a significant impact on governance. You need to know, is cloud better than on-prem platform for you? You need to know if I'm moving to cloud, what tier, free, standard, premium, or enterprise? What do those 4 tiers do, and which one's best for me? Those need to be discussion points. It's very important from a governance standpoint if you're considering enterprise cloud. We actually have a client we're working with right now that's moving off on-prem onto an enterprise cloud. Their on-prem version has multiple stacks. There are multiple groups there that are running their own server stacks for on-prem. They're moving to the enterprise cloud version so that they can still preserve and protect anybody that wants to have an independent instance, right? So that's very much a governance conversation on a lot of levels, high level and ground level. So moving on to a different platform or licensing in general is a big governance decision and discussion point, and we'd be happy to talk to you about that. Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, let me know if you have any other questions. Reach out to us. We go to our website that has all of our upcoming events. Actually, my screenshot here is a little old, but we updated. We do this every week, and we have other major events like training that we do and things like that. Go check that out. Also, go to our YouTube site and pull up Expium. We have a wealth of videos out there that are really great basic tutorials around some of the tools that are in the Atlassian ecosystem as well. But until next time, happy journeys in the Atlassian ecosystem, and let us know if we can help you with anything. Thanks for attending the webinar.